This morning, I am heading to Chicago, going to a weekend retreat conference type event for a mastermind that I'm a part of. And as I drive and squirrel a little bit, there are two different cars with Stitch on their back windshield in front of me. Anyway, uh, I want to talk about these types of experiences, these types of development retreats, weekends, um, communities, because it's in large part what inspired me to build Charlotte Entrepreneurs and to essentially to create so much of what exists today. And it all goes back to one weekend in particular back in Miami in April of 2022. So I want to share that story with you and give you a little bit of context on where all of that came from, what was going on, what the weekend was like, and what the inspiration was that came from that. And then just share a little bit and help you, hopefully, if you haven't experienced this type of community or mastermind, help you see a little bit of why it's so powerful. So back in April 2022, this conference was in late April. I had signed up for this community in, I think, September, October of the year prior in 2021. And at that point, I was building a real estate business. And I was in late 2021, I was at this point where I felt like I needed to build more. I needed to build bigger. I had flipped a bunch of houses. I had done a bunch of real estate deals, but I felt like it was time to actually build the business. I felt like that was what I needed to do. And so that's what I did. I was working on hiring, on systematizing, on doing all of the things. Fast forward into early 2022, and in January, I hired a bunch of people, or a couple of people. I rented an office. I got the software and the systems and all of this stuff to start building a lead pipeline for my house flipping business. And it didn't go well, if I'm being honest. When I flipped houses, when I was an investor, my bread and butter in the investor space was in financial analysis and creativity and being able to find good deals and creatively make them happen. We can talk about that another time. The other one was in figuring out how to get tied together, but figuring out how to maximize the space in a particular deal or in land or in inside the home to either knock down walls or shift things around so that I could maximize the value of that particular property. What I wasn't good at was talking to sellers. What I wasn't good at was anything else on the front end. Like if I had a wholesaler, if I had someone that brought me a deal that I could analyze and I could have a conversation and buy it pretty close to their asking price, I was in. If I had to go talk to cold call sellers and hop on seller appointments and all that kind of stuff, there's some people that are phenomenal at that. That was not me. But I had this idea in my head that I needed to own the top of the funnel. I needed to own the marketing mechanism that brought deals in so that I could control the deal flow, because what kind of jackass business owner only does a few deals a year? And I felt like I needed to do more. I had to. That was the requirement. That was success as a real estate investor and as a real estate business owner. So it wasn't going well because I was trying to train my team on things that I wasn't good at. And I went from flipping houses to building a house flipping business where I'd stopped flipping houses because I didn't have any leads coming through. In April of that year, beginning of April, I got married, and it was from a family standpoint, from a personal standpoint, it was a wonderful time. From a business standpoint, it was fucking miserable. I hated what I was doing. I was bleeding money. Because I had put all these things in place and just spent like a drunken sailor, I had thousands of dollars in overhead every month and I had nothing to show for it. In fact, I pulled the trigger on one deal because one of the employees of mine finally got a deal, and it was very shitty. Normally I would not have bought it, but I wanted her to get the commission and get the momentum and for everybody to see that we were getting a deal. And so I bought it, which that lasted for way too long and was an absolute nightmare. And I ended up losing $10,000 on it. The bottom line was, by the time I went to take this back to the main point of what I wanted to get to, that was the situation that I was in going into this event. As a part of this mastermind community, I knew that I wanted to be around people. I knew that I needed to learn more. I knew that I didn't need to do it all on my own anymore, and I wanted to learn from others. And so when I stepped into the weekend, I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know what the topic was. I didn't know what the format was, and it cost $5,000. But I was all in. I thought to myself, this is why I signed up for this community. So I'm gonna go. I'm gonna turn my phone off. I'm just gonna see what happens, and I'm just gonna open myself up. And the first night, there were two moments. One was before we went to dinner. This was all at a hotel in a conference room, and so we were having dinner upstairs. Before dinner, they gave us this kind of they prepped us for what to expect and what to do. And so they told us very specifically, when you go upstairs to dinner, there's 30 of you in the room. The question of what do you do is off limits. Don't ask it. Ask better questions. And I sat there with a guy named Matt. And Matt and I talked. He had a kid that was about the same age as mine. And he and I dove very deep in our conversation. Had never met each other before. But that prompt to have a different type of conversation opened things up and gave us permission to get past the awkward stage and to do things differently. And I thought, man, this is going to be different. Now, with Matt, what's funny is, fast forward a couple days later, that was on a Thursday. On Sunday, we left, and Matt actually drove me to the airport. And on that drive, he was on the phone. He was talking to someone from his work or business or whatever. And I looked at him and I was like, man, it has been 3 days of just going into the shit together. And I have no idea what you do. We laughed because normally that's the start in a business environment. And it wasn't the start for us. And as a result, we got so much deeper. The second thing that happened that first Thursday night was they asked what you're afraid of. And they had done a couple little exercises to open us up and to get us a little bit uncomfortable. But they asked to pair up with someone and talk about what you're afraid of. And I didn't have an answer, but something slipped, something cracked. I remember talking to my friend Jamie, and when I say I cracked, I mean I started to tear up a little bit, and I had no idea why. I had no idea what was going on, and he just looked at me and he's like, "That's something to pay attention to." And I didn't know what the fear was, but I think there was a mix of overwhelm and everything else based on what was going on in the business at the time. And so we had some good conversations. And later that night, as we're wrapping everything up, we had been talking a little bit about vision and about impact. And at the end of that night, there were two guys facilitating. I walked up to one of them and I was asking about I was asking something about my house flipping business and talking about the impact that I wanted to make sometime in the future. And this other coach and facilitator of the weekend, he walked up. I'd never talked to the man before in my life. And he looked at me because he overheard the conversation. And he said, "Patrick, what the fuck does flipping houses have to do with the impact that you're trying to make? What does it have to do with the life you're trying to live?" And he said, if you were talking about flipping houses or building houses for veterans or building houses in Africa for a massive homeless community, maybe I could see that tying together. But what the fuck are you doing? And it caught me off guard. And I was like, dude, I don't even know you. It was wild. But it got me thinking. And it got me thinking for the rest of the weekend. And that following day, the topics started to get deep, and they started to get a little bit, the topics weren't on their own heavier, but I felt heavy. Everything felt heavy because I felt misaligned and everything felt wrong. And a big part of what came up for me that weekend, my mom passed away when I was in college, and my dad less than a year after I moved to Charlotte. So my dad died when I was 30. I just turned 30. And my mom died when I was 22. Math is hard. 21. And so that was a big part of my identity. And I'll talk more about that in particular another time. But that was a big part of who I am. And what I realized that weekend is that I had never done a single fucking thing to process the loss of my parents. When I was when my mom died, it was the summer before my senior year. And it was a time that I had some big stuff going on, not just with school, obviously, but also with the Army, and I was wrapping up our OTC and all of these things. And so I just dove straight into a relationship that uh, didn't work, B, into the Army and into finishing out school and all of that. But I never put my head down, or I just put my head down and worked. I never took the time to actually process any of the things that I was dealing with. And same with my dad. I was less than a year out of the Army when my dad died, and I was working as a consultant at PwC at the time, and right after he died, I got on this project that I just gave everything to. And it was a cool project, and I enjoyed it, and it was a distraction. It allowed me to not think about and process the grief and the loss. And so I would save that for the moments where I just curled up in my room and I cried. And then I'd put on the happy face and I'd go back out and do everything all over again. And so that weekend, I started to realize all these walls that I had built up that were barriers to me getting where I was trying to go. I realized that I felt like I needed to prove something for my parents. I felt like I needed to deliver on something, and make the most of this. And some things that were generally not terrible ideas, but I was doing them in a very unhealthy way. I needed to prove something for mom, who was always an excellent business owner and absolutely killed it. But she didn't quite reach the final pinnacle that she was trying to get to when she died when she was 60. And so I realized that weekend that I'd been trying to pick up that torch for her and carry it across the finish line, whatever fucking stupid finish line I was thinking. And as a result, I built a life where I deferred living it. And I guess what I mean by that is all of the impact that I wanted to make, the things that I wanted to do, the experiences that I wanted to have, the joy that I wanted to feel, all of these things felt like they had to come secondary. They had to come after I earned a certain level of financial freedom or of business growth or whatever the fuck I told myself. And that weekend, everything changed for me because I realized how much I hadn't dealt with and how much I needed to, and how much it impacted every area of my life, how I showed up for my wife, for my daughter, for my business, for myself. And I started focusing deeply on taking care of myself and healing myself. It was a long, painful process, but it was so worth it. And the other part was I started to focus on what right looked like. So within a month, I had pivoted away from the house flipping business. I started on this journey of trying to figure out where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do with my life. I, in many ways, tried to remove this autopilot that I was on in order to start going down a path that I cared about and that was meaningful and that was aligned with who I was. And so there were a variety of things that came after that, and we can dive deeper on those another time. But that was when I got out of real estate. I bought a business, jumped on the business acquisition bandwagon, bought a lawn care company. Didn't like that either. But along the way, I had someone ask me if I would coach them. And I said, sure. We started doing it. I realized how much I loved it. And that's what eventually led to me doing one-on-one coaching, which led to Charlotte Entrepreneurs, which led to the mastermind, which led to everything that we see today. So to tie this all back to the origin, to the mastermind weekend that I'm going to today, I came into the weekend, into that experience, not knowing what I was going to get out of it, not knowing what to expect, but in the back of my head, my thought was, business has problems, fix the business. I thought there were plenty of real estate people in the room. I thought I'd probably get some tips on marketing and operations and all of these things to help me run the real estate business better. Instead, what I got was answers to questions that I wasn't asking. I got pushed on my blind spots. That question that I will never forget, the Patrick, what the fuck are you doing flipping houses? That rudely and amazingly shook me and woke me up. That changed. I can definitively say that weekend, April, I think 22, 23, 24, 25. Ironically, also, my mom's birthday was over that weekend and over that experience, as I spent half the weekend just sobbing. That weekend changed my life forever. Changed the trajectory of my life. It changed how I think about business, about life, about living, about presence, everything. It changed the relationships that I have. It changed how I show up. It changed everything for me. And it came because I got around people that were willing to open up, that were willing to have different conversations, facilitators that were willing to push us to be uncomfortable and hold us accountable and take us to this deeper place. And it was incredible. And every time I go to one of these, I no longer really set much of an intention. I know there's plenty of advice and suggestions around when you go to a retreat or an event or something like that, set an intention so that you know what you're going to get out of it. I've found that the most beautiful things come when I don't push, when I don't plan for it. Also is a double-edged sword, but we'll save that for later. But that inspired so much of what I wanted to build with Charlotte Entrepreneurs. Because when I got back, and eventually when I started Charlotte Entrepreneurs, I felt like there was not a local presence that enabled people to show up like that, to show up vulnerably and authentically, and to have the real conversations about life, not just business, not just the tactics, to just lay it all on the line and let other people see you for who you are. It also is what inspired the structure in many ways for how I run the Charlotte Entrepreneurs events right now. So if you've been to an event as you're listening to this, you'll recognize some of the similarities between what I experienced at that conference and what you experienced at a Charlotte Entrepreneurs event. It is the reason why these events, I talk about how they're based on who you are and not what you do. I don't give a shit about the what do you do conversation until I know you. When you walk into the room at Charlotte Entrepreneurs, my hope is that now the culture is getting there and is so much closer to what I want it to be, where people know that you don't just ask that question. People know that you ask better questions. People know that you start with relationships, because the people that I met that weekend that I went deep with, we didn't talk about what we did at the time. We'd do anything for each other because we got to know each other so deeply and so well. So as I wrap all of this up and tie it all together in, I guess, a very messy bow, these communities, I don't know why I said that so weird. These communities, these masterminds, these opportunities to dig in and just be you, to open up, they, to me, are so vital because they create this ecosystem of support that we may not have anywhere else. Even if you have, like my wife, those of you that have been to events and have heard me talk know how much I adore my wife. She is in a world of detractors, supporters, and accelerators, where supporters are the ones that are basically the what most people hope for. Someone that isn't gonna push back, especially as entrepreneurs. So many times that I walk into these rooms at these conferences, and the biggest problem that someone has is that their spouse hates what they're doing or doesn't feel comfortable with it or is a detractor. So many people just hope to have a cheerleader and supporter as a spouse that says, you got this, I believe in you. My wife pushes me. She always pushes me to be better. She makes me better every single day. She also doesn't own a business, and so she knows plenty about it, but there's a difference when you get around a room full of business owners. So if you have someone that is an incredible accelerator like I do, it's still valuable to get around rooms like this where you have people that are in the shit the same way that you are. If you don't have that type of accelerator, if you have people that don't support you, if you have people that are fighting against you and don't necessarily agree with or believe in the journey that you're on as an entrepreneur, it makes it even more important to get in these groups because it creates that camaraderie, it creates that support that you may not get elsewhere. So I guess the takeaway from this is to find your people. Find the people that see you enough to ask the questions that you're not asking or answer the questions that you're not asking, that see you enough to push you to be better, to be the best version of yourself, to push you to grow, to push you to think differently than the way that you're thinking right now. There's plenty of yes people in the world. We don't need more of those. We need people that are going to accelerate us, that are going to push us, challenge us, make us think better. And that's why I love being a part of this community that I'm a part of. When I've found a good one and I've found my people, it's incredible. It's why I've built Charlotte Entrepreneurs and why I love the people that show up, why I love the mastermind, and I love the people that we have as a part of this mastermind. And they've become some of my closest friends and people that I just love and care about so much. And I want that for you too. I'm not here to just pitch you Charlotte Entrepreneurs and that this community is the answer. I believe deeply in it. I'd invite you, if you haven't been a part of anything that we've done, come check out an event, come join us, come see what it's all about. But more than anything, find the people, find the right people for you. Whoever that is, whatever that looks like, find someone, because all of this is so much better when you're doing it with some amazing people.